Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, ma'am. Welcome, ma'am. Sir, shall we start, sir?
Nitya, you can go ahead.
Good morning, please. Good morning, thank you.
At the outset, it gives immense pleasure in welcoming one of our present today. Today's online guest lecture entitled Challenge That Challenge Them as part of Women's Day celebration, organized by National Cadet Corps, Nagapattinam Fire Education Committee and Karika Institute of Development and Initiative Municipality. Sorry for the inconvenience. I have a problem with network connection. Uh, sure. At the outset, it's immense pleasure in welcoming one and all present here to this online guest lectures entitled Challenge That Challenged Them as part of Women's Day celebration organized by the National Cadet Corps, Katpagam Academy of Higher Education, Coimbatore, and Karpa Institute of Development Initiatives, Metupalayam. The resource persons of are three single fingers who have tremendous knowledge and dedication in their fields. At the very first, I would like to introduce Srimati Shanta Nair, former women bureaucrat, a senior retired IAS officer of the Tamil Nadu cadre. Started her career as a sub-collector Dindigul in 1975. She is credited with having contributed to the successful implementation of the rainwater harvesting scheme announced by Chief Minister J. Jayalalitha. She also worked on an anti-flooding measure by creating rainwater harvesting points in low-layer areas. As a result, the groundwater level rose by 5 feet. Has been vice chairperson of Tamil Nadu State Planning Commission, and also she had been the officer on special duty at the Chief Minister's office. Then she has versatile extensive record which could not be covered in this short introduction. Now we would like to project a short audio visual as the honor to our beloved successive woman, Srimati Shanta Chinnanani.
Hello.
Excuse me, ma'am. Excuse me, ma'am. I'm sharing my
No,
screen.
do you want me to start speaking?
Ma'am, I'm sharing my screen. Hope it is visible.
It's
No,
not
it's not
visible, Nitya.
visible.
Now it is visible.
No, it's not visible yet for me.
Audio is not coming, Nitya.
It is short.
I didn't see anything.
Nitya, nobody saw anything.
Ma'am, shall I project again, ma'am?
It is visible,
No,
ma'am.
but
I can able to see that.
no, we are not able
Do
to
you
see.
have to press something else?
No, ma'am.
Ma'am, you can pin Center for Menstrual Hygiene Management login, ma'am. Center for Menstrual Hygiene Management login. You can pin it, ma'am. I think because of that only it is not visible to you.
No. That's not there.
Same, the same. Hope it is visible now.
No. Now also it is only your
Yeah, now it's visible.
Sujata ma'am, for you, it is
No,
visible?
only screen. A black screen is visible. Nothing is visible.
From our side, it is visible.
The audio is not coming for this, no?
No, audio is not coming.
But you can able to view the video, I hope so.
Ah, yeah.
Okay.
You start from the beginning, no?
With all her majestical record, I hope this guest lecture will strongly help us with a high inspiration. Now I hand over the session to Srimati Shanta Sheela. Now I hand over the session to Srimati Shanta Sheela Nair, retired IAS. Ma'am, please proceed, ma'am.
Good morning to everybody, and very happy Women's Day to all of you. Happy Women's Day to all the stalwart women who are on the panel, the aspiring stalwarts who are preparing the program today, and the supporting stalwarts, who are all the men who are here to champion and cheer the women on their way. So I wish you all the very best, and have a great celebration today. I have been asked to speak on the challenges that challenge them on two specific subjects, which is millet promotion and menstrual hygiene. But before that, I thought I would just go a bit into my own background and give you the context in whatever achievements I have been able to succeed in having was possible. One was that I am from an interesting community which is no longer very interesting, which is the Nair community. As you know, my name is Shanta Sheela Nair, and I never changed the name. I retained the Nair because Nairs are a community of people who champion their women. And it is no longer the case because they changed the laws later on. But in the traditional Nair society, it was a matrilineal society. It was not a matriarchal society. Women were not head of the family, but it was a matrilineal society which gave inheritance rights to women and their offspring, and secured for them economic, social, cultural strength and independence in the community. A woman was not thrown out of the house after her marriage. Widowhood did not bother her. Her children were never on the streets. Inherited the property and the wealth of the family and the titles of the family. It went to her children. So it was an empowered community where there were none of the ills of dowry, and there was no wailing when a woman was born, when a female child was born. In fact, a girl child was welcome because that ensured that the family heritage and the family inheritance continued. So it wasn't a perfect system. It was definitely better than what happens in the rest of the community. And the influence of Nair women in the Kerala society had its impact on almost all other women in Kerala, even though they did not belong to the Nair community. So I come from an interesting community, which is, as I said, no longer very interesting because we have thrown away all those structures which contributed to our strength. But this is an interesting thing, and I thought that I will showcase that. The second point that I would like to say is that I joined the civil service. Actually, I am from an army family, and had I been a boy, I would have definitely joined the military service. At that time, they did not take in women, and I was forced to join the civil service. And I am grateful to the civil service for having given us a great opportunity, almost I'd say, not entirely, almost an equal opportunity to excel and to showcase our work. I think the overall situation for women in the from the Indian Administrative Service and the higher civil services is definitely a far better environment to work in than most other professional fields, and I have benefited from it. The third point I would like to mention is that we always speak about our vulnerabilities. In my career and life, I have tried to exploit the vulnerability in the sense that when I was a young officer in Dindikal and sub-collector, those were the days when we were procuring rice and raiding people who were smuggling food grains and rice and all that. And as a young 23-year-old officer, I used to go and stand on the highway alone with my jeep parked somewhere behind. And the truck driver smuggling the rice would stop seeing a young woman. And I exploited that vulnerability. They thought a young, vulnerable woman is standing on the highway for help, and they would stop and I would catch them. So I just want to share this with you because what you think is a vulnerability can be a strength. And I also want to say that many of my colleagues felt that they were doing as well as me, but I got all the publicity. Of course, there was a lot of attention on me, and I had to be extremely aware of every little action that I did. That was the minus part of it. But the plus part of it was whenever there was a good thing done or an achievement or a successful project or a successful scheme, I think I got definitely more attention, more accolades, more appreciation than even my male colleagues. And because of the fact that I was a woman. And I exploited that to the full. I made sure that the message that women can achieve, excel things was carried as far as possible. And so I would like to give the message that what you think is a vulnerability can often be turned upside down into a strength. That does not mean you keep on just mining the vulnerability. Don't make it something that you exploit to such a situation that it becomes a negative point. And not in that sense. Not that you ask for benefits and some help or some reservations or something. Not in that sense. But when, but in the senses in which I explained to you, definitely it can be exploited to your benefit. Today, the situation is very different from the times when I was a young sub-collector. Today, you have women police officers, women in the army, women in the flying, combat aircraft and all that. So it is no longer novelty, but still there is a novelty in women coming into many of these professions, and the attention is on them, and that attention can be turned to your benefit. I would like to say that some amount of reservation of women for the panchayat local body posts and the self-help group of women movement have contributed enormously to the empowerment, particularly of rural women who did not have the opportunities that a person like I had. And it has changed the scenario completely and will go a long way in further enhancing and empowering women. Now, I'd like to speak about millets. Now, this is a neutral, gender-neutral subject. It is not particularly woman-oriented, but there is a woman aspect in it. I had promoted the idea of millets as an important food, as an important nutritious element of our consumption basket, and as an important means of reviving rural economies and rural livelihoods, and especially the marginal small farmers living on degraded lands, on rain-fed lands. This was their food in the past. These foods have been overtaken by the so-called fine grains. Millets and other grains were called coarse grains. I thought it was shameful that any grain, any food which is annadata, as we say, which is divine, should be called coarse, and something called fine. You think there is a caste system amongst human beings, there is a caste system amongst grains, and there is a politics of grains. The so-called fine grains draw out the coarse grains, and these were the food of the tribals, of the poorer people, and we taught them to eat rice and wheat through the public distribution network, and now they don't eat these nutritious grains anymore. So one of the great victims of this change in nutritious habits has been particularly the rural women of the country as a whole, who even today suffer from anemia and from relatively poor health, and the children who in India we still have the problem of stunting, of not proper, not improper growth, and not sufficient nutritional levels for our women and children, particularly in rural areas. And I have come across some studies which are very interesting, and I would like to share with you that even in areas where incomes have gone up, where agricultural incomes have gone up because of labor costs, labor wages having gone up, and so on, the nutritional status has come down compared to the previous times when incomes were low, when they were eating food from the local neighborhood, from the local fields around them. Now they are eating maybe a polished rice or some grain which is lower in nutritional content, and also not consuming other important elements of a balanced diet like greens and proteins which were available in a local pond from the fish or some local fowl or something. Instead of eating processed foods, they are buying, they can now afford a processed food, and so the children are being fed kurkure biscuits, and women are making a quick meal of Maggi noodles, as a result of which nutritional status has come down, health expenses have gone up, and the victims of these are the women. And I have been promoting millet consumption, particularly to enhance the health and nutritional status of women and children, and also to improve their incomes. It is also a fact that in rural areas particularly, women depend a lot on their livestock, on their dairy animals for their source of income. And during times of natural distress in terms of poor rainfall and water stress, the women are the first who are affected, because one, the water is the problem, and secondly, the livestock are affected for want of fodder. And the cultivation and promotion of millet crops in rain-fed areas lands would contribute to availability of fodder, and also of restoring, rejuvenating, and making sure that the animals are not victims of stress in weather conditions. And that will also contribute to the women's income, to the women's nutrition, to the children's nutrition. And I can go on and on about millets for a long time, but I think there are other speakers. I wouldn't like to go more into that. The only thing that I would like to highlight today is that some of us from the last almost 10 years have been championing the cause of the so-called coarse grains. So one of the things that has happened is the government of India now calls it the nutritious grains, so no longer the coarse grains. So at least the caste slur on the grain has been removed. And more importantly, just 2 days ago, I got the wonderful news that the United Nations has declared the year 2023 to be the International Year of Millets. So throughout the globe, I think particularly in the poorer countries of Africa and Latin America and all those places where nutrition is a problem and nutrition for women is a major issue, the promotion of these grains, these nutritious grains, will contribute to the health and well-being of the women and the children, without which no amount of empowerment can help, because all the income and empowerment that you give will go in processed food and deteriorating health. So I think this is very important, and we have to carry this message. The second point which you have asked me to speak on is menstrual hygiene. Maybe Sujata remembers the time when more than 10 or 15 years, maybe almost 15 years ago, we first talked about menstrual hygiene. In fact, it was such a taboo subject that I called the women aside from the conference hall and had a separate meeting with them to talk about menstrual hygiene. What can we do? And today, now, in fact, at that time, we promote menstrual hygiene in a big way through the self-help groups, and that's a long story. Siddhartha can elaborate on it. I wouldn't go into details, but at that time, some people from Government of India thought that I was doing a wonderful piece of work and recommended my name for the Prime Minister's award. But in the Prime Minister's office, they said, "What is this? What is this subject? Menstrual hygiene? How can we give a Prime Minister award for that?" And all. They poo-pooed it and threw it out. Today, I'm happy to say that in the Prime Minister's Red Fort Independence Day speech, he spoke about menstrual hygiene. So we have come a long, long way from the time when it was taboo even for the Prime Minister's office to think of it, to the Prime Minister himself talking about it. And of course, as you know, there are many heroes who have made their name because of their involvement in menstrual hygiene. But there are thousands of unsung heroes amongst women, particularly the rural women and the urban lower income group women, where the concept of menstrual hygiene has taught them not only menstrual hygiene, but overall awareness of the importance of sanitation, of the importance of cleanliness, the importance of hand washing. Today we are hand washing because of Corona and the COVID epidemic. But we had inculcated these messages long ago through the menstrual hygiene program and the sanitation program. Most importantly, this is the message that I would like to give. The tools or the kits for management of menstrual hygiene, whether they are sanitary pads or washable pads or cups or whatever may be, these are not rocket science. These you do not need to depend on multinational agencies at their highly priced, highly advertised, highly fancily packed products. These can easily be made at the local level, at the block level, at the town panchayat level, even at the village level by women themselves, and keeping the production, the means of production within the hands of the women themselves will contribute to A, the improvement of the women's economic condition, B, the dependence of women on their own products for their own hygiene, and thereby increasing the awareness of hygiene and the importance of wearing. At that women to wear masks and gloves to prepare the sanitary pads, and they were used to using any dirty cloth, any paper, any material for their menstrual hygiene management. And then when we taught them that you have to be so careful, that it is like a surgery or a surgeon preparing for a major operation, that you have to take care of your infection and prevent it from happening, gave a message to women how important their health is and how important cleanliness and sanitation were. So the point that I would like to say is that today we have large number of women who are in the process of producing their own sanitary napkins in the rural areas. They are even going in for washable napkins, reusable napkins, and the whole debate about better menstrual management. And as I said, the Prime Minister himself is talking about it, and we have, as I said in the beginning, not only women talking about it, but men talking about it, and an awareness growing throughout the community. So these were two challenges that I would like to highlight. Of course, you have mentioned rainwater harvesting in connection with the work that I have done. I think you will give me another opportunity to talk about rainwater harvesting, maybe on World Water Day. So I will reserve my long impassioned speech on water harvesting for that occasion, and please allow me to speak on sanitation also sometime. Today I will stop with saying that these are the great challenges. And I will be happy to mentor any young women, your organization or anybody to champion any cause, to fight for it, and to never say die, and keep on at it till you achieve your goals. And I think there should be a day, maybe 10 years from now, maybe 20 years from now, when we don't have to celebrate Women's Day. Maybe we will celebrate Men's Day, I don't know. But we don't need a special day, because we have made it on our own, and we don't need any longer any kind of, I don't know, some little bit of a conciliatory thing that poor women, they are doing so well, let us congratulate them. We don't need their congratulations. We will do well on our own, because we are what we are, and we find our place under the sun, and we are the protectors of the planet. So I wish you the very best, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for spending your valuable time. Now the forum is open for discussion. Students are there. They can post questions, clarifications to Srimati Shanta Sheila Nair, ma'am. Students.
I would like to start, Sujata here. I would like to start with this discussion. It's really a pleasure to hear Madam Shanta Sheila Nair. I think I've always wondered how she takes up those topics that others find it very difficult to enter, and she champions those causes. And I think that is the greatest thing. As an administrator, she has created that opportunity for and shown that women can lead the way. And this is one thing I found very admiring in quality in her. And particularly in those thoughts, like menstrual hygiene, when we started way back in 2004, in a meeting to talk about it, I remembered many male officers used to fidget when she was used to speak. And in 2008, when we had it in an international conference, we presented it in a thing. And we did not have many speakers. Now today there are many champions. We have the Padman coming. We have people who actors who are doing it. But still, we actually did that heartbreaking effort. And I'm happy to have her hear her speak to this day. And any questions, please ask.
Students.
Actually, Nitya, if questions we can take together, maybe we can ask the next speaker also.
Ma'am, I have a few questions, ma'am. What are the stages and obstacles that you have faced to become a best bureaucrat, ma'am?
Can you repeat the question, please?
What are the stages and obstacles that you have faced to become a best bureaucrat?
No, that's a very difficult question, because I can write a book about that. That will take a long time. I mean, let me just say that so-called obstacles and stages are not specific to bureaucracy. Whatever occupation, even if you're a housewife, you will have, and that, as they say, is the unsalaried work that a woman is doing. She has obstacles on her way too. We all face our obstacles, and we find our ways around it. So the obstacles, I don't want to specifically mention any particular obstacle, but when you enter into certain fields where there were no women earlier, and you're the first woman in those fields, there are two things that happen, as I said earlier. One is that all attention is on you, so the minor slip also becomes a major issue and can be criticized. The good thing is that any little success that you have also gets amplified. So you are in a glass house particularly, and you are conscious of the virtual stares of the entire community and the entire press and everybody watching your every move to see how you are performing. But if you get over that and start doing something with great passion and some amount of success, you have excellent feedback and excellent support. So so the obstacle can be turned into something which is which actually helps you on your way. I can't go into specific obstacles because I think they are common to any profession that you may have. Even a man in his profession goes through ups and downs, and there have been many obstacles they have faced to jealousy, backstabbing, political interference. These are all things that everybody goes through, and I don't want to go into specifics, but just that when you are the first woman in many of these areas, you have to be keenly aware of the plus and minus and work on the plus.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Ma'am, very good morning to everyone. I have a question for Sujata, ma'am. Dr. Sujata, ma'am, I have a question for you.
That you can ask later, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am.
She doesn't start now. Now we can clarification only for Shanta Sheila Nair, ma'am.
Ma'am, I have one question, ma'am.
Yes, Deepika.
Ma'am.
Yes, Deepika, you're audible. You can ask.
Ma'am, you are definitely an excellent example for women empowerment in India, ma'am. Share how you make yourself brave and bold enough to save the country, ma'am.
Can you repeat it, please?
Ma'am, share how you make yourself brave and bold enough to serve the country, ma'am.
I don't know. As I said, that's why I gave you a little bit of perspective. I was born a Nair woman, and that gave me some boldness and some independence. And I was from an army family. My father was a soldier, was a army officer, and I think those two backgrounds contributed to my general personality of some amount of courage and boldness. And I never grew up. I was always, my upbringing and my background was one in which we were valued irrespective of our gender. So many of you may not have had that kind of background, but what you can do is to give that background to your own girl children and never make them ashamed or feel sorry for the fact that they were born as girls. That makes a huge difference. That is one thing I'd like to say. Second thing is physical courage is also equally important to mental and emotional courage. You have to be physically in good shape. You have to be physically fit. You have to be physically courageous to walk long distances, to climb mountains, to physically do anything that anybody can do. To exert yourself, not always think that you're a woman, you can't do this, you can't do that, and you should be physically strong. That's why it was important for us when we were trainees to learn riding, because it is not that we have horses anymore and we need to know riding to do an administrator's job. But riding instills physical courage, how to manage that animal sitting on it. It is 3 times your strength. It can just throw you off. But learning to handle that animal gives you physical courage. And physical courage contributes a lot to mental courage and emotional courage also. So I feel that you should be as strong and active as you are mentally and emotionally. You should also be physically active and strong, and that will it's a blend of both which gives you courage and boldness.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hello, ma'am. Good morning. Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Audible.
What are the jobs carried out in planning commission and how people should aware about the commission service to the people, ma'am?
See, the Planning Commission does not execute any particular job. The Planning Commission's job is planning. In fact, now there is no more a Planning Commission, because as you know, in the Government of India level, the Planning Commission of the Government of India was wound up after the Modi government took over. and they have what is called the Niti Ayog. And in Tamil Nadu now, the State Planning Commission has been wound up. There is no more Planning Commission. It is called the State Development Council. So the functions of Niti Ayog and the State Development Council, which is slightly different from the Planning Commission of the past, was that in the Planning Commission you had to prepare the 5-year plans for each 5 year. Now we don't have to prepare the plans anymore. So what they have to do is to look at formulation of policy which can contribute to the development, social, economic, cultural development of the state as a whole, and then formulate some schemes and projects which can contribute to that. Now, one of the schemes that the State Development Council and the former State Planning Commission used to do was, besides the theoretical aspects of giving policy documents on what needs to be done, doing a lot of research, doing a lot of seminars, workshops on various subjects, on various challenges, coming up with solutions and then making reports out of them and giving them to the government to act on and to contribute to develop into schemes for implementation. Besides that, the Development Council also has two important schemes which I'd like to highlight. One is the State Backward Area Development Fund. We have identified some 100 blocks of the state which are backward in all parameters compared to the neighboring blocks or the rest of the state or the average performance of the state. And depending on what areas they were backward in, for example, they may be agriculturally backward, educationally backward, health-wise backward, or poor in terms of infrastructure facilities, poor in terms of power availability, many parameters of backwardness. We have a fund in the State Development Council which picks up these specific backward issues and tries to address it by seeing what we can do to improve their backwardness, to bring them out of backwardness, to bring them on par with the rest of the state or the rest of the block or the rest of the district, and to improve their condition as a whole. So this scheme has, because in the rest of the schemes in the state, mostly they are pan-state. They cover the entire state, they cover all districts, they cover all blocks. And so there is no fine-tuned attention to just one area or one specific area of backwardness. So the State Backward Development Fund has contributed a lot to that. In fact, through that, we have addressed many interesting issues of lack of infrastructure, of fine-tuning, of providing an input which was not covered by other schemes. One of the things that I remember doing was that we used the State Backward Fund to promote traditional varieties of grains, particularly rice, which we have lost. And there was no scheme for that, and we were losing all our traditional varieties. And this is something I'm very proud of, because some of these traditional varieties came to the farmers' aid during the Gaja cyclone and other cyclone, when they withstood the extreme weather events compared to the hybrid varieties and so on. So just to give you an idea of how the State Backward Grant Fund can address niche areas where nobody else has taken up, or there is no other scheme available for redressing those difficulties, and work on that. The other important scheme is that Innovation Fund. That is where anybody has got an idea or a project or a scheme or a plan which is innovative, which hasn't been tried before, and is looking for funds to somehow put it into effect and to implement it. Especially, this is only for the government departments at first. Normally, they can't do it because there is no fund availability for that particular scheme. They can come to the State Development Council or the Planning Commission and present their project, and the State Development Council will fund it. And this has been also a very good scheme. Some excellent initiatives were identified by the Development Council and taken up for implementation, and successful mainstreaming of those successful models. So these are two important things that now the Development Council is doing. And I said, basically, it's a think tank. It's not an executive agency. It's a think tank supposed to produce data, papers, policy documents for the government to take up areas of development, to know the areas where development has to be taken up, to enhance the work of the government in terms of identifying the right areas in which funds and personnel and all that should be directed. So that is the purpose of the State Planning Commission, now the State Development Council.
Ma'am? Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, share your some good deeds that you have done as a bureaucrat.
No, I don't know. You see, share good deeds. There are, you see, as a district collector or even as a secretary to government, every day maybe 100, 200 people may meet you, and if I have done anything good for them, they're all good deeds. So I really don't have a record of all the good deeds that I may have done or may not have done. They may have also been bad deeds, I don't know. But there are only some areas which I am proud of in retrospect after having retired, to remember that I contributed in some way, and those are mostly environment based. I was very much concerned with the condition of the environment. So I have taken up schemes like rainwater harvesting, tree planting, water conservation, sanitation, very many methods of sanitation, including, as I said, you give me another opportunity, I will talk more about it. I don't want to tell you all about it now. Sanitation was an area in which I contributed a lot at a national level. Secretary in Government of India also, dealing with water and sanitation. I was also secretary in the Ministry of Mines in the Government of India, and while mining is something which is exploiting the resources and a few people becoming extremely rich over a period of time, I used that opportunity to make available a part of the resources from mining to the local area, local people, and we set up the District Mineral Fund. Today, it is a major source of revenue from mining to local people in the mining area itself. So this is something which I helped to introduce at a national level. Today, there is the scheme Har Nal, this is a Hindi word which says a tap connection for every household. This was something that I introduced when I was Secretary Water Supply. I wanted it to be taken up on a large scale, but we were going about it slowly. Now the Prime Minister himself has announced it, and it has become a national scheme. So there was something else which I contributed to, and I was one of the first people who ever talked about it. That was the use of plastics in road laying. And in fact, the person who came with the idea, I took him seriously, and we laid more than 1,000 kilometers of roads with plastic waste. Part of the bitumen was replaced with plastic waste. I'm very happy to say that Vasudevan, who was the pioneer of that idea, had later got a Padma Shri for it. And I think in no small way I contributed to the fact that what he developed in a laboratory could be showcased throughout the state. Now it has become something all over the country. It has been taken up. If I go into each and every job of what I have done, I can keep on talking. I don't think that is the intention of this meeting. We need to talk more about women's empowerment. So let me stop at this stage.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Further, thank you for your precious answers, ma'am. And now I'm taking the honor to welcome Dr. Sujata Jagadish, Head of the Department of Genetics, the Team Fatal and Pediatric Cardiology, Mediscan. Fatal Care Research Foundation, FCR Mediator study was well acknowledged by Indian Council of Medical Research, and it paved the way for the same center to be selected as the regional coordinator of South India. In that, our team, Dr. Sujata Jagadish has investigated, completed the project successfully. Hence, she has a huge successive records which could not be covered in this introduction. Now, we would like to project a shot of this one. It's an honor to record successive women. Dr. Sujata Jagadish. I'm sharing the screen.
Nitya is not visible. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Nitya is not visible. You can ask that.
Nitya, at last we can post that video. Now I hope Sujata ma'am is ready, so you can start the meeting.
Yeah. You can send the videos you prepared for them in their mail and WhatsApp. They will have a look at it.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Now I hand over this to Sujata Jagadish. Please.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Honorable Shanta Sheila Nair ma'am, for your wonderful talk and your insights and all the valuable contribution you have done. And it was a great privilege to listen to you. And thank you, organizers, for putting up this wonderful meeting. And happy Women's Day to all of you. So I'm going to talk about an area of interest of mine, and this is called the rare disorders. So rare disorders are called rare because they happen to occur only in maybe 1 in 6,000 or 1 in 7,000 individuals, and they are not diagnosed that frequently because it's not a common medical problem that doctors come across, and so the diagnosis itself gets delayed. For example, even in United States of America, where the health facilities are all up and about, it takes about 6 years or 7 years for a rare disease to be diagnosed. So we can imagine the plight in our country. So the diagnostic delay is a very, very big challenge we are facing. And why is it important? Because diagnosis, if it is made on time, we can definitely do a lot of help to this individual and improve the quality of life. So access to healthcare and the expertise available for taking care of these rare disorders is also limited. So only a few experts are there in our country who can take care of these children or adults with rare disorders, and their needs are very, very specific. And one needs to develop the expertise and knowledge in how to handle these rare disorders. A few examples of rare disorders you may all be familiar, like it's thalassemia, sickle cell anemia, in blood disorders, and there are metabolic disorders like lysosomal storage disorders, inborn errors of metabolism, and there are many chromosomal and genetic syndromes. There are about 450 rare disorders have been identified in India. And when you compare it to the population of India, you will find that there will be a lot of patients suffering from rare disorders. So then the cost of testing is also very exorbitant because genetic testing is very expensive. And so cost of testing is exorbitant, and also the treatment. Treatment is coming up in a big way for many genetic disorders. We have enzyme replacement therapy, we have special diets, and ma'am was speaking about millets. So in inborn errors of metabolism, we have to give specific diets for these children. which are less harmful in aiding the metabolism of these children. So their requirements are entirely different, and we have to have a special dietitian to look at the care of the diet of these children. So, and there are many chromosomal disorders for which there is no treatment available, but then definitely a supportive system in the society is required for their well-being and for including them in the society as an individual who has some effort and some ability to perform. So that is the background of rare disorders, and mostly they are genetic disorders. So most of them are genetic and they are inherited. And so there is a risk for the family to have another child with a similar problem in the same family. And there are also the brothers and sisters and the extended family are also at risk of having a child with a rare disorder again in the family. So what is more important is genetic counseling. So first to access place of care where rare disorders can be diagnosed, and then genetic counseling. So once there is a problem in the family, these parents should present themselves beforehand before they plan for the next pregnancy to get the suitable advice, and how to avoid these in the subsequent pregnancy. That advice has to be got from a genetic consultant or a genetic counselor, so that these problems which have no treatment can be avoided in the future. And for problems where treatment is available, they should have the knowledge that yes, there is treatment available. So we have to go and access the medical facility in the earlier days, so that treatment also is effective. Once the child develops complications, treatment is no longer effective. So treatment is effective only when you start at the very early stage of the disease. So that is very, very crucial in genetic disorders. So that is the other thing. And then the monitoring of expenditure, monitoring of these children with periodic investigations. See, diagnosing and treating alone is not enough, because they develop all sorts of complications, and monitoring them with the 3 monthly, 6 monthly, yearly investigations is also a very big burden, because parents have to travel and invariably the mother is left to look after the child, and relatives don't come and help in such situations. I have families where the disease is called the Sanfilippo disease, where children are not aware about themselves, and they have to be fully taken care of by the mother. And the father has to go out to have earned expenditure for the family, and there are other normal children to look after. So this becomes a very big economic burden on the family, and the mother has to be empowered to look after these children. And also, she needs some solace from out of these situations, because all the time managing such type of children also causes a lot of distress on the part of the mothers. So this is one area where we are thinking on working, developing centers of hospice where children can be left in the weekend and they can be taken care of, and the mothers can be left to look after their own desires and needs at least for 2 days in a week. So this is a very big challenge these mothers of these children are suffering from. And so that is one area which I want to work on. And also how to take care of these children, because there is a diagnostic odyssey, and they have to be looked after by multiple specialists, because these rare disorders, it is not only one system disease. So they will have cardiac problems, they'll have lung problems, they have neurological, orthopedic, skin problems, joint problems. So it will be a multifaceted problems in these children. And so they have to visit multiple specialists, and they have to have multiple investigations at various places. So I found that this difficulty has to be circumvented. And so we started the Center of Excellence for Rare Disorders at ADEAR, at the Voluntary Health Services. So the main intention was to give a one-point care to these children. So when families with these children come to this center, so they will be looked after. They'll have a diagnosis, they will have genetic counseling, and they will also have treatment options, and they will also be looked after by a team of specialists at one place. So this is the intention, and it is slowly catching up. And then looking at the data. So we in India, we don't have proper statistics on how many rare disorders are there in our country. So as a first initiative in my institution, we started the Birth Defects Registry of India, which collected a lot of birth defects from various states across India. So more than 14 million births we calculated, and we found that there are few common birth defects like neural tube defect, which actually happens because of a nutritional deficiency called folic acid deficiency. So by correcting the nutritional deficiency in this mother, we can prevent the children being born with such defects. So the Birth Defects Registry of India was a very big initiative, and it was a role model for the nation and for the state to take on as an example to find out the data of birth defects, and now we have an ICMR national registry functioning at around 13 to 14 centers across India, which is picking up data on these rare disorders. Because unless we have the data, unless we know the numbers to whom we need to cater, it is very difficult for the government to plan budgets. So in that way, I think there is an ICMR step which has been taken in the last few years, and about 13 to 14 centers are reporting the birth defects across the nation. So the other thing is newborn screening. So these children, as soon as they are born, some problems can be picked up in the newborn period by taking a few drops of blood from the heel of the child at 48 to 72 hours. So by doing newborn screening, we can identify these children early, start treatment early, and so we can prevent mental retardation in these children. For example, congenital hypothyroidism can be picked up at 48 hours of life after the child is born, and we can put the child on treatment. Treatment is just giving a small tablet of thyroxine supplement. But this will go a long way in ensuring that the child has a normal development and prevents a child becoming mentally retarded. So it is so very important that we do newborn screening. And I'm very happy to say that our center was the first pioneers center in the state which took up a project, a pilot project, and we did it in the government Institute of Child Health also, and included many private centers in the city of Chennai. And we really monitored 1 lakh babies over a period of 1 year. And we found that the incidence of congenital hypothyroidism and another condition called congenital adrenal hyperplasia, both are quite treatable. And we found that it is very common, and both are treatable, and picking up them early is very, very good. So these sort of initiatives like collecting the data, doing newborn screening, and having a center of excellence for caring for these rare disorders are all steps which are taken to help children with rare disorders. And also prenatal testing. So once the family is diagnosed with the genetic disorder, the next pregnancy, once we have a diagnosis, we can do a test in the next pregnancy to find out if the fetus is affected or normal. So based on whether treatment options are available or not, parents can make a choice of whether to continue the pregnancy or not if the baby is affected. And also educating women about rare disorders, because in our state there is maximum number of consanguineous marriages. Consanguineous marriages are marrying maternal uncle, marrying atte's son or mama's daughter, so something like that. So they are all marriages happening between relatives. So what is the problem in marriages happening between relatives is we share genes. So between family members there is sharing of genes, and that's why there is a resemblance. You resemble your grandma, you resemble your mommy, you resemble your chitti. So all that is because of sharing of genes. And in families with genetic disorders, these problematic genes also get shared. So that's why in consanguineous marriages, in the marriages that happen among relatives, the problematic genes also get shared, and that's why there is more incidence of genetic disorders in such families. So avoiding consanguineous marriages in families where there is risk of genetic disorders is very, very important. And I think all of us should be aware that consanguineous marriages should be stopped for the betterment of the future generation. So this is an important message I wanted to give. And there are now treatment options that are available, but then all are very expensive. All are very expensive, and youngsters, young women should realize that now we are bringing under control the infectious diseases, and better vaccines are available. So now infectious diseases is no more the cause for childhood morbidity and mortality. Now developmental defects and rare disorders are becoming the most common cause for childhood mortality and morbidity. And I think the awareness about this should rise, and people, youngsters, should know how to have a healthy future generation, how to take vitamin supplements, how to keep yourself healthy. And diabetes is a very, very notorious problem that is happening in women. And nowadays, because of the increasing fast food and everything culture, now even younger girls are developing diabetes. And having diabetes during early pregnancy leads to several birth defects. So awareness about all these things, and then rubella infection in pregnancy can lead to severe birth defects. So having a rubella vaccination, and adolescent girls, college girls should know all these things, and should also help in empowerment of women in rural areas. So educational programs of how to have normal children, how to report early when there is a problem in the family. So all these educational messages have to be propagated through all the sections of people. Like rural areas, people are not knowledgeable and no information reaches them. So there are a lot of birth defects happening there because of lack of knowledge and lack of early diagnostic facilities. So that is important. And also the most important thing is fund. So fundraising is a very, very important aspect in rare disorders. So we can do a lot of crowdfunding, periodic crowdfunding to create a corpus. To create a corpus for centers of excellence of rare disorders. So there is continued supply of funds to look after these children on long term. And government is also developing a policy for rare disorders. And because of the lack of knowledge about the numbers of actual people suffering from rare disorders, the budget preparation is a little difficult for the government. And of course, health is a state subject, and about 60% of share has to come from the state, and 40% has to come from the government. So there are national committees which are set up for planning for care of these rare disorders, and government is definitely heading towards creating a budget to care for these children. And especially where treatment facilities are available. For example, enzyme replacement therapy is available for a disease called lysosomal storage disorder. And in 1 month, the treatment cost is around 10 to 12 lakhs for a month. So if you can imagine, that has to be given lifelong. So who can afford such sort of treatment? So the government has to definitely take steps and interfere, and then talk with the pharma companies and then bring down the cost, and also develop in-house research to develop products from India so that the cost is considerably less, and promote a lot of research in the area of genetics, because now more and more treatment options are coming on, and encourage more students also to involve in such research, and also to help as a social cause. Thanks for the patient hearing, and any questions I will be most happy to take.
The forum is open for discussion. Dear cadets and students, can go ahead.
Ma'am, unmute yourself, ma'am. Shantashila Nair.
Ma'am, you are not audible, ma'am. Please unmute your mic, ma'am.
Ma'am, please unmute yourself, ma'am. Shanta Sheila Nair, ma'am. Your voice is not audible.
Madam Sujata Jagadish, I'm happy that you are here today. I remember your efforts you have taken for forming the LSG Support Society, and those are contributions I think that have challenged the entire system and have tried to work with patients and improve the quality of life. And even though treatment and there were no possible cures, but still they work for providing a care and improving the quality of life of many of those patients. We have a question here. It says, how you entered the field of genetics and what inspired you to join such a reputed field, ma'am?
So I was basically a pediatrician. I'm trained in pediatrics, and I used to see a lot of these children with disabilities and rare disorders getting admitted for various ailments. And I found that there are a lot of pediatricians available to look after the common problems like cough, cold, fever, etc. But then very few pediatricians were available to look after children who had special needs. So that's when I was thinking I should do something about this. And at that time, I got a call from my present institution, Mediscan Systems, where they asked me to set up a special department, genetics department, to take care of children with birth defects. And because this is a scan center where they detect antenatal abnormalities, and children were being born with birth defects, and we had to counsel mothers with an ongoing pregnancy who had a birth defect as to how the outcome will be, how to look after the baby after the child is born, and what care needs to be given to these children. So all these information had to be given to the parents in the antenatal period, so that the mother is prepared well before she receives the baby after birth, and they know what to do with their baby after the baby is born, and not running around with the baby suddenly without any information. So in that way, it was a very good antenatal counseling service which we developed here. And subsequently, children who were born needed support, had different challenges, and they had to be looked after in a special way. So I think the pediatric training and my intention to look at these children, I think, brought me into this field, and I'm here since the last 24 years.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am Chantashilan, ma'am, you wanted to say something, ma'am. We were not able to hear you, ma'am. Please unmute and speak, ma'am. Ma'am, unmute.
Not able to hear.
Ma'am, unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, doctor, I want to congratulate you on the wonderful work that you're doing, and it's so inspiring to hear how much you have worked in this area. I was thinking that one of the simple ways of reaching this message of awareness to young mothers or would-be mothers is to prepare some programs on YouTube, because now, especially the young people, everybody is on smartphone, even in rural areas. I have a boy from the village working in my house. He doesn't know English, he doesn't know anything, but he is working beautifully on a smartphone, and he's looking at YouTube and cooking very nicely. So, what I wanted to say is, maybe, a cheap and effective means of communication could be the internet, and could be making small programs available in YouTube, in a common, ordinary language, non-medical language. Talk to women and tell them how to look after themselves and how to prevent this from happening. That is one thing. Secondly, I don't know, doctor, but I don't know whether we have ever considered the possibility, because I am talking as a bureaucrat and as a policy maker, this consanguineous marriages, whether I don't know what is the legal position with consanguineous marriages, whether they are whether they're fully legal, whether we should take some steps to see whether we should do something more from the policy point of view, from a legal point of view, to prevent this from happening. Because I have seen many consanguineous marriages where disastrous results have happened to the children, blind children, children with very rare neurological disorders, only because of consanguineous marriages. So maybe we should have a movement not only to create awareness, but also maybe to prevent it by law. I don't know. Maybe this is just a point that I would like to share with you. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, that is very true. But then the baseline data, so before we take it to the government, or before we make any policy decisions, we need to have baseline data of everything, ma'am. So, and we need to have a proof to say that we have to have a control group where non-consanguineous marriages, what is the birth defect happening, and in consanguineous marriages, what is the percentage of birth defects happening, and we have to show the government the difference, and then only people start believing and people start accepting. So for all that, we need the baseline statistics, which is the most biggest challenge we are facing. To collect that statistics is the most biggest challenge. So once that is done, I think things will roll on easily. And even to develop a diagnostic lab, see, there are now methods by which even before marriage, you can test yourself whether you are a carrier of genetic disorders. So that test is available. So even to make the group of tests that are required for our society, we need to have the baseline data of what are the common problems, for instance, in Tamil Nadu, what are the common problems, and we can make a package test to test the parents whether they are carriers of that disorder. And the marriage proposal, like now they may mix match horoscopes, we can also match their genetic profile before marriage. So that is possible now. So that is the greatest advantage. But for that, we need to know what is common in our population, and have the strong data to develop such tests. So that is possible, ma'am. Definitely we can move forward, but the only hitch is getting the data.
I appreciate what you say, doctor. Maybe we should start collecting the data. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I think someone is asking whether Down syndrome can be detected in pregnancy. So there are methods to detect Down syndrome in pregnancy now. By around the 3rd month, we do a detailed scan where we look at the skin fold thickness in the nape of the neck and also whether the nasal bone is ossified at that particular time, and then do a blood test. So by doing all this, we can have a 85 to 90% detection rate of Down syndrome in pregnancy. And there is also one more test called the non-invasive prenatal screening, where we do a detailed scan to rule out anomalies and then take the mother's blood sample and we check on the DNA from the mother's blood and see if the mother's pregnancy has Down syndrome or not. And this test has 99% accuracy and it is non-invasive. It can be done from the mother's blood itself. So we can detect majority of Down syndrome in pregnancy quite early in pregnancy.
Ma'am, very good morning, ma'am. Ma'am, what are the health issues that people are facing nowadays, and how it will affect our generation health-wise, and what is the solution for this, ma'am?
Health issues, mainly, as I said, nutritional deficiency. So, pre-conceptional folic acid and B12 supplement has to be given to all mothers, all prospective mothers, so that a woman who's planning to become pregnant should be on the vitamins. And there's no point in taking vitamins after conception because the neural tube forms in the very, very primitive stages of the embryonic development. So the prospective mother should be on nutritional supplements. And then, as I told you, the lifestyle modifications, because all now software and all these companies, they just make women work from morning till night. And there is no time for exercise and there is no proper diet which is being consumed by these mothers. So these lead to a lot of health issues like obesity, diabetes, and hypertension, which are all very detrimental to a developing baby. So lifestyle modification is a must, and I think in corporate offices they can make exercise compulsory. Maybe give a half an hour or 1 hour break for women and even men to do some physical exercise, because working from 9 to night 9, I think without any break, and definitely deteriorates the health of these individuals. So that is one thing. And then prevention of infections by having immunizations prior to pregnancy is also very, very important. And as I told you, mental health is also very important. And mothers on treatment for various disorders also should come for counseling before they become pregnant, so that medicines which may cause birth defects can be avoided. So all this education, I think pre-pregnancy education is a must for all women, and they should make use of these services to have a healthy generation.
Ma'am, one more question. How women are
How women are empowered in the genetic field?
How women are empowered in the genetic field, like a professional or a patient? I don't
like people, ma'am. Mostly they want to know how many women are there, how have they been able to.
I think genetic field, in India is mostly occupied by females. There are, however, males in the genetic field. Our father of genetics in India was Professor I.C. Verma in Delhi, Gangaram Hospital. But then there are several female people in the field of genetics in India. And I think pediatrics and obstetrics are both fields which make people take interest in the field of genetics, and we all move on to genetics when there are special interests to take care of these rare disorders. So I think it is woman power in the field of genetics in our country.
Ma'am, please give some suggestions for young generation to enter into genetics field.
Like
disconnect
there are several young generation can enter medical genetics. They can do a medical curriculum and then graduate into pediatrics or obstetrics or dental medicine and move into genetics if they want to be a medical professional. And a paramedical professional, they can do MSc in genetics and then become a genetic counselor. There are genetic counseling courses, and there is a board of genetic counseling in India which gives an exam and certifies genetic counseling people, and that is a very, very important and a good profession in the field of genetics. And if you want to do a lot of research and diagnostics and be in the laboratory side, you can do biotechnology, engineering biotechnology, and then move into the field of genetics and improve upon yourself.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for spending your precious time. Now I am taking the privilege to welcome Dr. G.P. Godinavalli, ma'am, students and family counselor, social activist, and founder, Tyagi G.P. Valen Trust, Coimbatore. She is one of the remarkable social worker of Coimbatore city, and she has imparted counseling to the released female prison inmates. Her counseling gave tremendous changes in their personal behavior of the released female inmates. She has been working as a resource person for personal excellence personal excellence training program to present a trainee wardens inactive office of project third popular, and she also committed social worker whose service is always for the welfare of society, clean environment, and struggling women and youngsters of our society. Her cooperation with serving department and the Coimbatore cooperation is highly commendable and commendable by all the dignitaries, which was acknowledged by the government. Recently, she has been honored by all the ex-vice chancellors of and president registrar of various universities for her priceless service. With all her precious service records, I hope this guest lecture will strongly help us to walk forward towards the motive of great service and social responsibility. Now I hand over the session to Dr. G.P. Godinavalli, ma'am. Ma'am, please, ma'am.
Yes, good morning to everybody. I'm very happy to be here on this Women's Day. That this Women's Day celebration is giving us a very good, nice impression on everybody, and it is nice to meet you all. Our Madam Dr. Shanta Sheila Nair gave a very good, excellent speech. It was very much useful to everybody, but at the same time, we are having a webinar only. If it is on the online, I mean, in person, the program was on in person, means it will be very much useful to everybody. And also, Dr. Shanta Jagadish, she gave a very good speech about the women's problem, how they are facing problems in the pregnancy and everything, how to become a very good woman with a good, excellent, healthy women, how to be healthy women and everything, what type of vitamins we should take, everything. She gave a very nice program, and I'm going to speak really related to the challenges in the women. We've got a very challenges in all fields. It starts from the baby life, because in the baby itself we are facing that abuses are happening in and around all cities, not only cities, rurals and metropolitan cities and everywhere. These should be avoided in the future. We want to work with that, how to avoid these type of abuses in the future, and we all ladies want to be together and work for that. I think Madam Dr. Shanta Sheila Nair will take part for this, and she will also, because as I'm a counselor in all women police station as well as court and everywhere, even in the prison, I'm facing a lot of problems related to this. All women are telling, when I'm studying in the schools, I'm getting abused. When I'm studying in the college, I'm getting some type of abuse. And also when they are coming to the office or any other place in the work spot, also they are getting some type of harassments. These type of harassment should be avoided in the future. We want to work for that continuously throughout 24 hours. We want to work for that to overcome these type of harassments and abuses. This happens because of so many reasons. Everybody is telling because of dress code, because of the way of behaving, way of moving with the boys and everybody. But we've got an eye. We have to see the women as a good character only. We should not have indifferent character by seeing the dress code or anything. So I want to say a few lines about the women. Women in India have a play important role in our world and as well as in India. As a daughter, as a sister, as a wife, as a mother, as daughter-in-law, as sister-in-law, and also working places as an employee, as employer, and every aspect they have to undergo one way or other type of harassment, either by physical or mental. These type of harassment should be avoided in the future, and they ought to come out. All the ladies are ready to work for the benefit of the family, not only the family, the benefit of the nation also. But in this type of workplace and other places, the ladies are facing a lot of problems that they are not able to say it out either in the family or to the friends or anybody. As a counselor, when I'm sitting with the people only, I came to know what type of problems they are facing. So this should be avoided in the future generation. They should be feel happy. All are equal only. When you are telling about that they are all equal, but when they are coming out to the working spot or any other places, the women are treated in differently. In addition, they have to undergo biological changes in their body from their teenagers to lifetime. All harassments relates to the domination of men and women on each role stage. From childhood stage, the boy given better treatment than girl, and girls brought up in support of suppressed manner. In education also, girls are not given proper higher education in the past history. But nowadays the girls are coming up and they want to do not only master's degree, they want to do doctorate, not only one day in doctorate degree, they want to go further. Even they enter into the job also, they are doing a lot of higher educations when they are in the colleges, when they are working in the some other spot also. So like that, all the people are, all the women need education. They are doing it, but this education should be treated properly. In education, all girls are not good to educated parents and think that the marriage is the only way for the girls to come out from their life. But some of the parents are thinking the girls should get married before when they enter into the higher education. But most of the parents are thinking nowadays the girls should have proper education and also placement. She should work for her and she should earn, she should get salary of her own, then she can get married. So nowadays, what to say, the minor marriages are stopped almost because of the government taking much interest. Below minor age, the girls should not get married, and it has stopped nowadays. But even though very few, still they are coming out to the police station or to the court after getting married in 17, 16, 17s, and with a baby within 19 years, and they are coming out at the age of 20 for a divorce in the court. It should be stopped by ourselves only. But I am very happy here. Our Sridhar sir is taking a very good role in this type program. As a man, he is taking more and more care of this program and giving lot of outlet to the other people also, and this should be encouraged. This type of man, if you happens to meet this type of man in the future, there won't be any harassment in this world at all. It should be seen there. Even in general, crime against women is nothing but controlling women, all aspects. The women's freedom is controlled by agents, and some of the women are coming out after getting some of the crimes also, after facing a lot of problems in the family, after facing a lot of problem in the society, after facing a lot of problem in the workplace also. After that also, they are coming out and giving very good result for the benefits of the family and also to the world. So these type of harassments should be stopped in the future. For that work, we have to work with Madam Sheila Nair and Dr. Sujata Jagadishan, and everybody should work for that, how to come out without harassment world and without abuses. So in the future, we want to work for that. So to keep the women as happy as more, because all the ladies are wanted only that love and affection from others. The love and affection எங்க கிடைக்குது எப்படி கிடைக்குது அப்படிங்கிறதுக்காக தான் girls are suffering. எங்கேயாவது ஒரு பக்கத்துல ஒரு love and affection when they are studying in the college or any other places, then immediately they are fall in love and they are spoiling their life. But at the same time, even an elderly person gives a love and affection to a younger girl, immediately and the girl வந்து அந்த man whether he got married or he got a grandchildren or anything, they are not bothered. At the same time, they are falling into love and they are getting the life spoiled life. They are spoiling their life also. So இந்த மாதிரி ஒரு இதெல்லாம் நம்ம ஸ்பாயில் பண்றதை விடாம கேர்ள்ஸை வந்து நல்ல நிலைமைக்கு கொண்டு வந்தா all the girls are leader for this. ஏன்னா நம்ம எல்லாருமே ஃபேஸ் பண்றோம். Ladies are more capable person. They are very soft, they are very simple, and they want to become in a high position to help others. Girls and women are very much interested to come up in the life. Family life la varanga, at the same time they want to come out a very lead a happy life in the public also. So politics la vandirukanga, ella edathillume ladies are flying like anything, but at the same time ladies மேல வரதுக்கு இன்னும் கொஞ்சம் ஹெல்ப்ஃபுல்லா இருக்கிறது வந்து ஜென்ஸ் தான். எல்லாருமே சொல்லுவாங்க லேடிஸ்க்கு பின்னால ஒரு ஜென்ஸ் இருக்காங்கன்னு சொல்லிட்டு. நம்ம லேடிஸ் வந்து நம்ம மேல வரணும்னு நினைச்சா all gents can at the back of us, they can support us, and I want to give a lot of speech related to this topic and other things. Due to time constraint, I want to stop here, and if there is any other questions, please ask me.
Thank you, ma'am. I think this was a very good opening to the point on stopping violence against women. I think we are looking at an important sustainable development goal on gender equality, and violence against women is one thing we have to challenge, whether at home, from birth to death. And I think that is a very valid point that you have spoken about. And the state has taken a lot of initiatives, but I think as women we should actually have more bonding and realize and support women, and not be bystanders when violence against women happens. That I think is a critical point that I want all students and younger generation people to remember, that we should not be bystanders in an act of violence, but take some active things to intervene and help women out when they face violence, whether it is at the household level, when they are facing domestic violence, or in the workplace, or any other, even in the outside areas. I think that is the thing, this sisterly bonding we should have to stop violence. And that's a challenge I think that all women must take up on this day, when we are challenging so many things, that we will not allow any of our sisters to suffer from violence, and that should be one of our things. And to bring gender equality, this will be the things, to not to be subjugated to violence and to rise above the violence. I think this is a critical thing for achieving Sustainable Development Goals 5. And probably in the 5 years, we will move on the indicators and try to reduce the violence against women happening in the state and as well as the country.
Nice thing.
I like to add one point along with Dr. Sujata. Ma'am, actually for Sustainable Development Goals, we are focusing on gender equality. Even we are creating such forum to communicate both male and female to understand better in life. So we are creating many forums to discuss with eminent personalities, and also we are guiding them in such a way to eradicate these things. We are also focusing on gender equality, ma'am, as you mentioned rightly, SDG 5.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That
Yes,
yes, we have to work. Men also have to work with women and giving them their
Yeah, I
due
am
share.
sure. I am here to support.
I'm sure, sir, always you are supporting.
It becomes empowerment. It's taking power. People assume that it's taking power from somebody and giving power to another. It's not like that. We as equals in this thing, and we also own half the sky. And I think we have to get the due credit for the work we do, and that I think is critical. And gender equality, and sometimes we have to look at it from the equity perspective. And that in the sense that when we are looking at disadvantaged women and from the marginalized and vulnerable communities, we may have to give them extra push so that they are made to look as, they can compete on an equal footing. But that does not mean that they are not given the equal opportunity and equal facilities and access and availability to all services. So I think that is a major point we should look at.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Nitya, if there is no question, let me add a point, ma'am. In the eve of Women's Day celebration, we have announced for a contest, video making contest, in which they have selected the young and also dynamic women achievers, and they have created a short video, and we have collected almost 48 videos. So in which we have handpicked only 3 videos, the best one. It was created by Sentamil Moli from Karpagam Academy of Education, and S. Sasi, first year BCom from Pachayapas College for Women, and S. Gayatri, first year Karpagam Institute of Technology. So we like to appreciate these 3 students, and also we like to send the appreciation certificate, and also we are going to send a small token of gift for them. I like to mention in this forum. Thank you, and thank you, Srimati Shanta Sheela Nair ma'am, and thanks for Sujata Jagadishan ma'am and Dr. Sujata.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining, and Godanamali ma'am. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Now I request Prajita ma'am to deliver vote of thanks. Sujata ma'am,
yes.
Do you like to share something, ma'am?
So I think I think we can have the vote of thanks, but I think we should have some smaller forums where probably like Dr. Sujata and Madam Sarvashree, and I think that we can have small interactive discussions on what can be done for these challenges. What are your ideas? So you should use this opportunity to share and probably help these people to and learn from these people to carry on the challenges that they are facing and help them move along. So, Madam Shanta Sheela, from her vast experiences in working with various challenges, she has also outlined a lot of challenges. And in the care for the rare, Ma'am has shown up a lot of challenges. So I think as young people, you should come up with your own innovative ideas and see how we can move forward in addressing these challenges. And I think this forum should be used for this. And with that, I hand over to you to take it forward.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I request Prachita ma'am to present vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now, on behalf of National Cadet Corps, Karpagam Academy of Higher Education, and Karupa Institute of Development Initiative, I am more than happy to first of all thank Mrs. Shanta Sheela Nair, Dr. Sujata Jagadish, and Dr. G.P. Godanavalli ma'am for spending their valuable time and knowledge in their busy schedule. And I take this wonderful opportunity to thank our estimated President, Dr. R. Vasandakumar, Vice Chancellor, Dr. S. Suralimuthu, Registrar Dr. M. Palanisamy. It cannot be arranged without the encouragement and support of the institution, that too during this situation. And it's my immense pleasure to thank our commanding officer for providing this great responsibility. I extend my deep gratitude to Director Research, Lieutenant Dr. K.P. Sridhar, and Honorary Director of KD, Dr. S. Sujata ma'am, and other faculty members for their guidance and moral support. Last but not least, I would like to thank my dear cadets and all the other participants. Once again, I thank each and everyone on behalf of Katpam Academy of Higher Education. Thank you all. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for your presence. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you all. Thanks for participation. Thank you, ma'am.